The women of Bloodborne, beautiful, mysterious, melancholic figures marked by cruel destinies. Much has been discussed about how Bloodborne explored themes like pregnancy, the female body, blood, especially feminine, and, of course, the influence of 19th century Gothic literature on the game's narrative. But, in today's video, I want to take a different approach. I will draw a parallel between the women of Bloodborne and the portrayal of women in the Gothic literature of Edgar Allan Poe. What do these doomed women, haunted by death and fate, have in common with Poe's tragic heroines? So, get ready to dive into the stories of beautiful, cursed women in both Poe worlds and the nightmare of Bloodborne. Before we talk about the women of Bloodborne, it's important to remember that the game doesn't just borrow the aesthetics of the 19th century. It's deeply rooted in the period's architecture, fashion, and literary influences. Bloodborne also presents its female characters in a way that closely mirrors the social values of post-industrial revolution society, more specifically, the world of the Victorian age. The Victorian era refers to the period between 1837 and 1901, during the reign of Queen Victoria of Britain. It was a time of rapid industrial growth, a deep fascination with science, religion, and death, and of course, strict social values. Often called the Age of Modesty, it was defined by a rigid sense of morality and strict roles for men and women. Women were idealized and dedicated, pure and devoted first to their fathers, then to their husbands. Yet, this time was also full of contradictions. Progress moved hand in hand with anxieties about sexuality, madness, and the limits of science. Naturally, these tensions would be explored deeply in the literature of the time. Some of the major archetypes that emerged about women were the ideal of the perfect woman. The Victorian woman was expected to be pure, pious, and submissive, a loving wife and devoted mother. This ideal was reinforced through etiquette manuals and popular novels of the time. Women were praised for their virtue or condemned for their sexuality, often framed within a clear opposition: the Madonna, pure and innocent, versus the fallen woman, morally ruined. Some important novels that discuss this theme include Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, where the character Jane embodies the moral and spiritual strength typical of this ideal, though Bronte gives her agency and self-respect. The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, 1850, which portrays Hester Prynne as the fallen woman, publicly shamed for adultery yet maintaining inner dignity. Woman as morally and physically fragile. Another common view of Victorian women portrayed them as morally and physically weak, often seen as victims of a specific illness like hysteria, known at the time as the female disease. At the same time, diseases that weaken women, like tuberculosis, become romanticized within literature. Death and wellness in young women were often idealized as a form of divine purity. It was common for authors to describe women with pale skin, fragile beauty, and a sickly, almost spiritual expression. Edgar Allan Poe, in particular, mastered this image in his stories, where female characters frequently embody this romanticized fragility and tragic beauty. The femme fatale. Finally, we have the figure of the femme fatale, a powerful archetype especially common in Gothic literature. She is the beautiful, mysterious, and dangerous woman, endowed with intelligence, knowledge, and beauty, capable of dooming a man. One of the clearest examples is Carmilla, 1872, by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, a classic story of a female vampire who seduces and preys upon both women and men, blurring the lines between love, dangers, and death. Important note: these visions of women were not limited to English literature. They were widespread throughout Western writings of the 19th century, influencing French, German, American, and Italian literature as well. Since Bloodborne draws so much inspiration from the 19th century, with its romantic movement, Gothic literature, and even Victorian society itself, I thought it would be interesting to trace a connection between the game's female characters, not all of them, but a significant part, and the typical elements found in the works of Edgar Allan Poe, one of the most respected authors of the period, and someone who had a very particular way of portraying female characters. Edgar Allan Poe was an American writer and poet, widely regarded as a master of Gothic fiction and the inventor of the modern detective story. Known for his haunting tales of death, madness, and the macabre, Poe explored these darker corners of the human psyche with a poetic style. His most famous works include the beautiful poem The Raven and the tales The Telltale Heart and The Fall of the House of Usher. Many today may know his work through the amazing Netflix adaptation The Fall of the House of Usher. Poe famously wrote that the death of a beautiful woman is, unquestionably, the most poetical topic in this world. His works often center on a beautiful female and beloved who dies young, becoming an object of reverence and obsession for the narrator. For the French poet Charles Baudelaire, Poe portrayed women in an almost angelical way, luminous beings shining through a supernatural mist, painted by the hand of a passionate worshipper. His women are often sickly, speaking in voices that sing like music, delicate and beautiful. The women of Bloodborne are not far removed from these elements. Both Bloodborne and Poe shares a fascination with death and beauty, with idealized women, madness, resurrection, and forbidden knowledge. So let's take a closer look at how Annalise, Queen Yharnam, Arianna, Lady Maria, Iosefka, the Plain Doll, and Sister Adella mirrors the heroines of Edgar Allan Poe. Each one embodies themes of the sublime and the grotesque, standing as both lovely ideals and living nightmares. In a hidden crypt, the Pthumerian Queen Yharnam weeps blood for a stolen child under a red moon. Queen Yharnam is a tragic figure from the ancient civilization of the Pthumerians, the first to harness the eldritch powers of the Great Ones. What we know about this race is that they resemble humans but are much taller, having lived eras before the humans of Yharnam. It is also clear that the Pthumerians managed to communicate with the eldritch truth in a way far beyond anything humans have achieved. At some point, Queen Yharnam was chosen to bear the child of the Great One Odeon. Whether by her own will or by force, we do not know. And when the Great Ones descend, a womb will be blessed with a child. She wears a beautiful white bridal gown and a veil hiding her face. A bloodstain marks her belly, revealing to the player that a terrible act of violence was committed against the pregnant queen. Throughout Bloodborne, Yharnam appears silently, bloodied, grieving the loss of her child Murgo. She is never a threat to the player, but instead a constant reminder of the horrors committed in that place. Though dead, the queen lingers, as if refusing to vanish, unable to accept her fate, trapped in eternal suffering over the death of her child. Her sobbing is chilling. The description of the Yharnam stone, a sacred heirloom the player receives after defeating one version of the queen, states, "A sacred heirloom left by Yharnam, Pthumerian queen. The queen lies dead, but her horrific consciousness is only asleep, and it steers in unsettling motion. Just like the queen, many of Poe's heroines refuse to stay dead. In the short story Morella, we follow a narrator who, after the death of his wife during childbirth, becomes haunted by the fact that his daughter bears a striking resemblance to the deceased woman. Morella's pregnancy was agonizing, her body wasting away to bring the child into the world. Before dying, she curses her husband, who had never truly loved her, saying, "The days have never been when thou couldst love me. But her whom in life thou didst abhor, in death thou shalt adore." The child, also named Morella, becomes the great passion of the narrator, but like her mother, she too dies. The story ends with the narrator burying the daughter in the same tomb as the mother, only to realize, in horror, that the body of his wife was no longer there. The tale suggests that Morella's consciousness survived death and found a new vessel, her daughter. Much like Queen Yharnam, her horrific consciousness is only asleep, and it steers in unsettling motions. The Queen aesthetic also closely mirrors Poe's heroines. Beautiful and fragile, idealized in death, pale, and always accompanied by the light of the moon. The conceptual art of Queen Yharnam makes it very clear that the creators designed her to be hauntingly beautiful, even in a macabre way, with her blood-stained bridal gown. In Poe's famous poem, Annabel Lee, the narrator celebrates the beauty of a young woman even after she passes away, describing how he lies beside her in her tomb, eternally devoted. "For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea." Annalise is the eternal queen of the Vile Bloods, an immortal and dangerous monarch imprisoned by Martyr Logarius, the leader of the executioners, who were responsible for destroying the Vile Blood dynasty tainted by forbidden blood. The Vile Bloods were nobles who gained access to the Old Blood, which corrupted Kinghurst and transformed its inhabitants, aristocratics driven by insatiable thirst for power and immortality, into a kind of undead. Annalise is beautiful, pale, and has long black hair. She now wears a mask, a symbol of her imprisonment, though the player can still see her portrait scattered throughout the castle. She speaks in Old English, like a true Gothic character, hinting that she predates the citizens of Yharnam.
"I am Annalise, Queen of Castle Kinghurst. Ruler of the Vile Bloods, and sworn enemy of the Church. Yet our people are murdered, and we are prisoner to this wretched mask. What is it thou art in search of?"
Annalise's beauty closely resembles that of Lady Ligeia, a character from Poe's story of the same name. Ligeia is described as having dark hair, a musical voice, elegance, and a beauty beyond comparison. I would in vain attempt to portray the majesty, the quiet ease of her demure, or the incomprehensible lightness and elasticity of her footfall. I was never made aware of her interest into my close studies save by the dear music of her low, sweet voice, as she placed her marble hand upon my shoulder. In beauty of face no maiden ever equally her. Annalise is also culture, a woman of knowledge who subverts the Victorian ideal of female submission. Though defiled by forbidden blood, she retains a regal grace, speaking in noble, sorrowful tones. The walls of Kinghurst are lined with countless books, and the castle holds a vast library reflecting her world of aristocratic learning. Like Annalise, Lady Ligeia too was described as intellectually superior to most women and men of her time. And the narrator recalls feeling like a child whenever she spoke of philosophy and metaphysics. An extraordinary trait for a female character in the 19th century. And like Annalise, Ligeia refuses to die. After falling victim to a fatal illness, Ligeia returns from death, haunting and possessing the body of the narrator's new wife, Lady Rowena. Both women embody an undying beauty intertwined with death. Annalise can be resurrected if slain, her body recreated from her queenly flesh at a nightmare altar. And Ligeia rises by taking over another's body. For both of them, death is not an end. Finally, Ligeia carries the Gothic beauty of a vampire, draining the life from the pure Rowena in her refuses to accept death. This is striking, as Annalise, the undead queen, also carries an unmistakable vampiric aura. Not only her character, but the very atmosphere of Castle Kenhurst evokes a Gothic narrative, with its grand, decaying halls speaking of a glorious past. A place once filled with elegant men and women who walk those corridors with pride and power. Annalise indeed resembles a vampire, possessing a dangerously magnetic power so great that she had to be imprisoned. She remains beautiful and immortal, traits adored by romantic poets. A detail worth noting, Annalise was inspired by Lady Bathory, the 14th century Hungarian countess infamous for allegedly bathing in the blood of young women to preserve her youth. Bathory's morbid desire to remain eternally beautiful became a major inspiration for Gothic vampires, including Carmilla and Dracula. As the vampire Carmilla herself once said, "Nevertheless, life and death are mysterious states, and we know little of the resources of either." Another character who subverts the typical role of the Victorian woman, adopting the role of femme fatale with vast knowledge and intellect, is Iosefka, or rather, the imposter Iosefka. Who exactly she is, we don't know. At first, Iosefka appears as a kind doctor, with a soft voice, afraid that her patients might be infected. But as the game progresses, it becomes clear that Iosefka has been replaced by a cold, cynical imposter. This false Iosefka is a manipulative scholar who lures people into her clinic with promises of protection and Yharnam overrun by beasts. Yet, the fate awaiting these poor victims is far worse than being caught in the hunt. The scholar conducts horrifying experiments, attempting to create kin, creatures that are part human, part cosmic entities. She represents the madness that comes from the pursuit of knowledge without empathy, one of Bloodborne's central themes, as I discussed in my previous video about forbidden knowledge in Elden Ring and Bloodborne. Transgressive knowledge and forbidden science are key drivers of Gothic plots. Poe's Ligeia and Morella are both described as women of extraordinary intellect, deeply immersed in mystical or occult learning. Morella studies mystical German philosophy and metaphysics, unsettling her husband with her arcane knowledge. Ligeia, as mentioned earlier, was such an intellectual force that we can infer she turned to dark text in a desperate search to overcome death itself. Before perishing, she recites ominously, "Man doth not yield him to the angels, nor unto death utterly, save only through the weakness of his feeble will." Iosefka also defies the boundaries of what is acceptable in her obsessive pursuit of knowledge. Her science leads her to literal monstrosity. After the red moon rises, the hunter finds Iosefka collapsed on her operating table, twitching and mumbling about eyes on the inside, herself transformed by the very process she once inflicted on others. In fact, she drops a third umbilical cord upon death, suggesting that she was impregnated by the Great One. Annalise and Iosefka, both examples of the femme fatale archetype of Gothic literature, each in their own way challenge the rules of their world, and ultimately pay the price, much like Poe's tragic heroines. Arianna, the woman of the night, the fallen woman whose blood can bless or curse the player, perfectly embodies the Victorian duality between the impure woman and the caring, innocent maternal figure. At first glance, she seems to be just another woman from Yharnam seeking refuge from the beast that roams the city. She is beautiful, speaks softly, and treats everyone with grace. The Oedan chapel dweller even happily comments that she is the only one who talks to him without fear of his appearance.
Oh, kind hunter. Thank you. So, that lady, you told her about this place? Well, she actually talks to me. Well, only now and then, and she don't mince words. But she's a kind one. I can tell. A good woman.
Arianna also wears the same aristocratic attire once worn by the nobles of Kinghurst, suggesting she may be a descendant of those fallen aristocrats. The game never makes this entirely clear, but it's possible she could even be a unwanted daughter of the queen herself. As the bloody of the city corrupted citizens, Arianna's fate turns darker. When the great ones descend, a womb will be blessed with child. Under the blood moon, Arianna becomes that chosen womb. But the word blessed twists into cruel irony. What she delivers is an unspeakable horror. Venturing into the tomb of Odeon, the player finds Arianna sitting pale and catatonic in a chair, a squalling celestial infant at her feet. The baby is a small, misshapen lump of tentacles and flesh. Arianna herself can only weakly laugh and stare, her mind utterly shattered. The scene is both grotesque and heartbreaking. The image of a gentle woman, once seen smiling warmly at the player, now reduced to the unwilling mother of a nightmare, a woman with no choice left in a merciless world. It is a terrifying and tragic moment. The hunter may choose to end the creature's life, and Arianna dies as well, perhaps a final mercy, but the emotion wave of the scene lingers. Like Poe's woman, Arianna is beautiful, fragile, and doomed to tragedy. Eleonora, one of the Poe's heroines also fated for sorrow, is described as a soul of purity. The loveliness of Eleonora was that of the seraphim, but she was a maiden artless and innocent as the brief life she had led among the flowers. Though seen by Yharnam society as a simple woman of the night, Arianna is portrayed as innocent and joyful, a rare light in a city consumed by darkness, a light that must be extinguished. Her innocence is stolen through unwanted maternity, grotesque birth, and endless madness. Arianna's innocence also sparks the fury of another female character, Adella, the nun. Sister Adella is portrayed as saintly, pure, and caste, a member of the Healing Church, a blood saint who provides her blood to those in need. Interestingly, it is possible to deduce that Adella, like many other blood saints, was used as a vessel capable of receiving the holy blood of the great ones, such as Ebrietas. Adella offers her blood to the player as a token of gratitude for having been saved. However, the nun hides a much creepier side. She becomes obsessed with her savior, the hunter. If the hunter accepts the forbidden blood of Arianna, forbidden because it is not sanctified by the Healing Church, Adella begins to watch with suspicion, almost with a sickly jealousy. If the player accepts Arianna's blood too often, Adella snaps. The once quiet, pious nun transforms from a fearful prayer into an aggressor. When confronted, Adella is found stumbling madly with a dagger, her dress stained with blood, a tragic figure lost to madness. In this frenzied state, she is no longer a gentle caregiver, but an almost possessed figure who attacks the player. With no choice, we are forced to put an end to her madness. If the player happens to die at her hands, Adella says menacingly, "I will never leave your side." Here, interestingly, the comparison with Poe's work is not with his female characters, but rather with his male protagonists. Poe's histories frequently feature men driven mad by the loss of a woman, but here, it is a woman who is driven mad by rivalry and obsession. Hoderick Usher, the hypochondriac and unreliable narrator of the fall of the House of Usher, buries his sister alive, convincing his madness that she was dead. Egeus, the protagonist of Berenice, also descends into insanity over the supposed death of his beloved. Just like Poe's characters, men teetering on the edge of madness, unable to distinguish reality from dream, unreliable narrators, Adella also loses her grasp on reality. She can no longer tell right from wrong, truth from delusion. In ending Arianna's life, Adella perhaps imagines she is saving the hunter's soul or purging a sin, but in truth, she has fallen completely into madness. Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower is a noblewoman from Kinghurst who became a disciple of German and a former hunter. At some point, during her time as a hunter, Lady Maria joined the Bergenworth scholars on their expedition to the fishing hamlet, where they discovered the horrific mutations among the villagers, caused by the corpse of Kos, a great one. Maria and the other hunters took part in the brutal slaughter of the villagers and the desecration of Kos' body, a sacrilege that cursed them forever. Consumed by guilt, Maria abandoned her beloved weapon, the Hakuyu, and likely chose death as her final escape. The description of the Hakuyu states, "One day she abandoned her beloved Hakuyu, casting it into a dark well, when she could stomach it no longer." Maria is fearless, strong-willed, and beautiful. A member of Kinghurst's royal bloodline, she is also highly intelligent. In many ways, Lady Maria resembles Poe's previously mentioned character, Lady Ligeia. Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower can also be seen as one of the dead who do not rest. While Maria in life was a fierce hunter, in the nightmare she appears an eternal guardian, long diseased yet still young in appearance, sitting lifelessly in a chair at the top of the clock tower, trapped in the nightmare.
Should be left well alone.
In Edgar Allan Poe's works, women often symbolize idealized beauty, but they are also marked by doom, guilt, and inevitable death. Lady Maria chooses death as a tragic release from her overwhelming guilt and sins, yet she remains trapped in the nightmare, a dead, beautiful woman, unable to escape the burden of her past. After the boss battle with Lady Maria, the plain doll in the dream subtly senses something has changed. Good hunter, this may sound strange, but have I somehow changed? Moments ago, from some place, perhaps deep within, I sensed a liberation from heavy shackles. Not that I would know. How passing strange. This poetic moment suggests that Maria's spirit was finally freed. Finally, Bloodborne presents us with another curious character, the plain doll, pure, domestic, caste, silent, the ideal woman. The plain doll is a creation, a lifeless figure animated by German, the first hunter, and the mysterious forces of the dream. After tragically losing his beloved pupil, Lady Maria, German replicates her in the form of the doll, with the same height, the same voice, but dressed differently in more modest, feminine clothing. The description of the Maria Hunter garb states, Maria is distantly related to the undead queen, but had great admiration for German, unaware of his curious mania. This mania was German's obsession with the young woman. Perhaps he never had the courage to act on his feelings, keeping his longing hidden, but by creating the doll, he could cling to her presence. Yet the player quickly realizes that German is largely indifferent towards his creation. He even tells the new hunter,
You're welcome to use whatever you find. Even the doll, should it please you.
It becomes clear that in trying to replicate Maria, German did not realize that the doll would lack the very thing he truly longed for, her living soul. The doll was merely the projection of his fantasies, an idealized version of Maria, molded into what he wishes she could have been. But when he looked at the doll, he realized she was anything but Maria. Perhaps, disturbed by this truth, he emotionally distanced himself from his creation. The plain doll is the submissive, delicate, fragile version of what was expected of women in Victorian society, the same society that inspired Bloodborne's world. The plain doll is a gentle, soft-spoken replica of Maria, an idol of a lost woman, reminiscent of Poe's story The Oval Portrait. In that tale, an artist paints his wife with such obsessive realism that when he finally finishes and declares, "This is indeed life itself," he turns to find that his bride has died from neglect. German's doll functions in much the same way, a perfect image of Maria that nonetheless lacks her true essence. He poured all his love and grief into creating this artificial ideal, just as Poe's painter gave all his passion to the portrait. Indeed, both narratives show the tragic consequences of idealizing women into objects, seeking to create pure beauty but ending only with lifeless artifice. Through these female characters and themes, Bloodborne demonstrates a profound kinship with Gothic literature and romantic horror. While H.P. Lovecraft is often mentioned for the game's cosmic horror, the influence of Edgar Allan Poe runs just as deep. The game's female figures personify death and beauty intertwined. They haunt the player with ghostly presence, and they suffer the extremes of tragedy and transformation. Each of them embodies a different phase of Gothic dark tales: the mourning mother, the fallen queen, the doomed lover, the intellectual femme fatale, the mad woman, and the artificial ideal. Through them, Bloodborne explored themes that Poe himself made immortal: death and obsession, love and madness, beauty and decay. And just like the heroines of Edgar Allan Poe, the women of Bloodborne continues to linger in our minds, beautiful, broken, and formidable. Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, from the rare and radiant maiden who the angels name Lenore, nameless, here forevermore. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content about video games lore. Thank you for watching. Until next time, bye!